Something was terribly wrong with Chief. For 3 days, the German Shepherd had refused his food, standing frozen at the kitchen door with hackles raised and amber eyes fixed on something beyond the Arkansas pines. Samuel Whitehorse had seen that look before. In Afghanistan, when Chief's training detected hidden explosives. But this was different. This was fear. The 74-year-old Cherokee veteran followed his dog's unwavering gaze toward the ancient oak that had stood sentinel over his property for 2 centuries. That's when he saw it, a grotesque bulge swelling from the trunk like a tumor, bark split and weeping dark sap that carried the wrong smell on the October wind. Chief backed away, whimpering, a sound Sam had never heard from his battle-hardened companion. The dog who'd faced Taliban fighters without flinching was trembling like a pup caught in thunder. Sam's weathered hand tightened on his walking stick. In 46 years of owning this land, that tree had never looked like this. Whatever was growing inside that ancient oak had his dog terrified, and Chief's instincts had kept them both alive through 2 tours of duty. Something was buried in that tree, something Chief remembered. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Samuel Whitehorse had earned his peace the hard way. After 20 years as a Navy SEAL and 2 tours in Afghanistan, he'd returned to the 500 acres of Ozark Mountains his Cherokee grandfather had left him. The land held stories older than America itself. Ancient hunting grounds where his ancestors had walked, where sacred oaks had witnessed centuries of triumph and sorrow. At 74, Sam's body bore the weight of a warrior's life. Shrapnel scars mapped his weathered arms, and his heart required daily medication to maintain its steady rhythm. His wife Emma had passed 5 years ago after a brutal fight with cancer, leaving him alone except for Chief, the German Shepherd who'd served as his military working dog in Helmand Province. Chief wasn't just a pet, he was Sam's battle brother. The dog had saved Sam's life twice overseas, once detecting an IED that would have vaporized their convoy, another time alerting to a sniper's position seconds before the shot. They'd both returned home carrying invisible wounds. Sam's nightmares came with the sound of incoming mortars. Chief's arrived with sudden, loud noises that sent the dog scrambling under furniture, panting and trembling. But they understood each other's demons. On the worst nights, when Sam jolted awake in cold sweats, Chief would be there, a warm, solid presence pressed against his side. When thunderstorms triggered the dog's combat memories, Sam would hold him steady, whispering reassurances in Cherokee until the fear passed. Their routine was sacred and simple: morning coffee on the porch, watching sunrise paint the mountains gold. Afternoon walks along familiar trails where Chief could run free, his intelligence and loyalty legendary among the scattered neighbors. Evening meals shared in comfortable silence, 2 old warriors who'd earned their rest. The property itself was a sanctuary. Rolling hills thick with oak and hickory, a clear stream running through the valley, wildlife that had learned to trust the quiet man and his well-trained dog. Sam had built a simple life here: solar panels for power, a vegetable garden, enough firewood to last through winter. After decades of violence and chaos, this land offered what his soul craved most: peace. But that peace shattered the moment Chief began acting like he'd seen a ghost. The dog who'd faced Taliban fighters without flinching was now afraid of something on their own land. Sam's military instincts, dormant but never dead, began stirring. When Chief was scared, smart men paid attention. Something was coming. Something had been here all along. It started on a Tuesday morning when Chief refused his breakfast. The German Shepherd stood rigid at the kitchen door, every muscle tense as a coiled spring, staring toward the woods with an intensity that made Sam's combat instincts prickle. In 10 years together, through thunderstorms and fireworks that triggered the dog's war memories, Chief had never missed a meal. "What is it, boy?" Sam's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to reading danger signs. He'd learned in Afghanistan that when Chief acted strange, smart soldiers paid attention. The dog's ears lay flat against his skull, a low whine escaping his throat. Not the territorial warning he gave to bears or coyotes, but something deeper. Something that spoke of old fears and buried memories. Sam followed Chief's unwavering gaze through the kitchen window. Past the vegetable garden, beyond the split-rail fence, the ancient oak dominated the hillside like a monument to time itself. Cherokee legend claimed that tree had witnessed the Trail of Tears, had sheltered warriors before the white man came. Sam's grandfather used to say the oak held the memories of the land, keeping secrets in its rings that would outlast generations. But today, something was different, terribly different. The massive trunk, easily 8 feet in diameter, had developed a grotesque swelling about 6 feet from the ground. The bulge stretched the bark until it split in several places, weeping a dark substance that didn't look like normal tree sap. Even from 100 yards away, Sam could see how the growth violated the oak's natural symmetry, like a tumor that had been growing for years. Chief backed away from the window, pressing against Sam's legs with trembling flanks. The dog, who'd faced enemy fire without flinching, was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. His amber eyes held an intelligence that sometimes unnerved visitors, the look of an animal carrying burdens too heavy for words. "Easy, Chief. Easy now." Sam ran weathered fingers through the dog's thick coat, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath. "What's got you spooked, old friend?" But even as he spoke the comforting words, Sam's own unease was growing. In 46 years of owning this property, he'd walked past that oak thousands of times. How had he missed such a dramatic change? The bulge looked recent, yet something about it suggested long, slow development, nature taking its time to reveal whatever secret lay hidden within. Sam reached for his field glasses, military surplus binoculars that had served him well in reconnaissance missions. Through the lenses, the oak's deformity became even more disturbing. The bark hadn't simply cracked from internal pressure. Something had pushed outward from inside the tree, stretching and finally breaking the outer layer. The exposed wood beneath was discolored, taking on a grayish hue that reminded him uncomfortably of old bone. Chief's whimpering intensified as Sam studied the tree. The dog paced to the back door, then returned to press against his master's legs, clearly torn between the desire to flee and the need to stay close for protection. His behavior triggered memories of their time in Helmand Province, when Chief's exceptional training had detected hidden dangers that human senses couldn't perceive. "You smell something, don't you?" Sam lowered the binoculars, his voice heavy with understanding. "Something that shouldn't be there." The phone rang, jarring in the morning quiet. Sam glanced at the caller ID and felt a familiar mix of affection and unease. Thomas Blackwater, his nephew, called every Tuesday like clockwork. The 45-year-old had been devoted to Sam's welfare since Emma's death, managing medications, handling bills, ensuring his aging uncle didn't face the challenges of rural living alone. "Morning, Uncle Sam." Thomas's voice carried its usual warmth. "How are you feeling today? You sound tired." "Chief's acting strange," Sam said, still watching his dog's agitated behavior. "Won't eat. Keeps staring at that old oak like he's seen a ghost." A pause, brief but noticeable. "The big one on the hill, probably just catching scent of some animal. You know how he gets with his war nerves." "This is different, Thomas. The tree's got some kind of growth on it. Looks wrong." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll swing by tomorrow to take a look. Might be disease, oak wilt or something. Could be dangerous if it spreads to the other trees." Sam found himself studying his reflection in the kitchen window as they talked. Weathered face mapped with scars, silver hair still thick despite his age. Thomas was right about one thing. Sam had been tired lately. His heart medication seemed to need adjusting constantly, leaving him feeling weaker than usual. The isolation that had once brought peace now sometimes felt oppressive. After ending the call, Sam returned to watching Chief. The dog had positioned himself between Sam and the window, as if protecting his master from whatever threat lay hidden in that ancient oak. It was a protective stance Sam recognized from their combat days, when Chief had learned to read danger in ways that kept them both alive. Something was wrong with that tree, and Chief knew exactly what it was. Sam decided that Wednesday morning to investigate the oak himself. Chief's behavior had worsened overnight. The dog barely slept, pacing restlessly between the kitchen and the back door, occasionally releasing sharp barks that echoed across the valley like warnings. When Sam approached the door to step outside, Chief physically blocked his path, pressing his considerable weight against Sam's legs with a determination that spoke of desperate protection. "I hear you, boy, but we need answers." Sam's voice carried the quiet authority that had commanded respect in combat zones. He retrieved his grandfather's axe from the tool shed, a magnificent piece of craftsmanship forged in the 1890s when men still made tools to last generations. The hickory handle was worn smooth by 4 generations of white horse hands, its surface dark with age and honest work. Chief followed reluctantly, staying close enough to defend, but far enough to bolt if necessary. His amber eyes never left the oak as they approached, and Sam noticed how the dog's hackles remained raised along his spine. In all their years together, through firefights and explosions that would have broken lesser dogs, Sam had never seen Chief display such obvious terror. The tree loomed larger as they drew closer, its grotesque bulge even more pronounced in morning light. The split bark wept more of that dark, wrong-smelling substance, and the odor that reached them made Sam's stomach clench. Not the clean scent of pine resin or normal tree sap, but something organic and disturbing, like meat left too long in the sun. Chief refused to come within 50 feet, positioning himself on a rocky outcrop where he could watch but maintain distance. His whimpering carried a note that cut through the morning air like a blade, not the warning he gave to bears or wolves, but something deeper, more primal. Sam circled the oak, his experienced eye taking in details. The tree was ancient, maybe 200 years judging by its massive girth, but the swelling was wrong, too uniform, too purposeful. He'd seen burls before, twisted growths that formed when trees were injured or stressed. But this was different. The bulge faced east toward the old trail that wound up from the valley floor, as if deliberately positioned to be seen from a specific direction. The first touch of axe to bark sent Chief into a frenzy of whimpering. Sam paused, studying his companion's distress. In 15 years together, he'd learned to trust the dog's instincts above his own. When Chief said something was wrong, something was wrong. But curiosity had always been Sam's weakness, the trait that had led him into special operations, that had driven him to volunteer for the most dangerous missions. Whatever lay inside this tree had been waiting for decades. It could wait a little longer while he made the first careful cut. The axe bit deep with a solid thunk that echoed off the surrounding ridges. Instead of the clean, resinous smell of fresh-cut oak, the breach released an odor that made Sam step back involuntarily. It wasn't decay exactly, but something preserved and wrong, like opening a root cellar that had been sealed too long. The second cut revealed a hollow space within the trunk. Sam's flashlight beam penetrated perhaps 6 inches into the cavity before disappearing into darkness that seemed to swallow the light. The walls of the hollow were smooth, worn by decades of the tree's growth, but clearly unnatural. No insect or disease created chambers like this. With growing unease, Sam made a third cut, widening the opening enough to peer inside. What he saw made his blood run cold and his grip tighten on the axe handle until his knuckles went white. Fabric. Old, dark fabric that looked like leather but felt wrong when he touched it with the tip of his knife. The material was soft with age and damp from decades of imprisonment within the living tree. As Sam carefully pulled at one edge, he realized he was looking at what had once been a jacket, now so deteriorated it came apart at his touch. Beneath the fabric, his light caught the glint of metal, something that might have been a belt buckle or piece of jewelry. But it was what lay deeper in the cavity that made his hands shake and his breath catch in his throat. A wallet. The leather was darkened with age and moisture, but still intact enough to reveal its contents. When Sam opened it carefully, fighting the stiffness of aged cowhide, he found exactly what he'd hoped and feared to discover. A driver's license, water-damaged and faded but readable enough to make out a name, Dr. James Red Cloud. The address was illegible, but the birth date was clear, March 15, 1962. If the license was current when its owner died, Dr. Red Cloud had been 47 years old when he met his fate in this remote valley. Sam sat back against a nearby boulder, the license in his weathered hands. This wasn't tree disease or natural growth. Someone had been sealed inside this oak decades ago, and the tree had grown around them like a living tomb. The morning sun, which had felt warm on his face when he began, now seemed cold and distant. Chief's agitation reached a new level as Sam continued his careful excavation. The dog paced in tight circles on his rocky perch, occasionally letting out sharp barks that echoed off the surrounding ridges. It was as if he could sense something beyond the physical evidence, some lingering wrongness that clung to this place despite the years that had passed. The implications were staggering. Sam had been living in proximity to what amounted to a grave for over 2 decades without knowing it. Someone had used the forest's own growth to hide their crime, relying on natural processes to seal the evidence forever. Chief's behavior suddenly made terrible sense. The dog's trauma responses weren't just from their combat tours, they were from witnessing something unspeakable happen at this very spot years ago. Chief had been carrying this secret, waiting for Sam to discover what the loyal animal could never communicate in words. As Sam packed the evidence carefully, his mind raced through the implications. Somewhere out there, someone had gotten away with murder. And now that the secret was exposed, anyone who knew the truth might be in danger. Sam spent the next 3 days quietly researching Dr. James Red Cloud's disappearance, using the old desktop computer in his study while Chief maintained vigilant watch by the window. The internet connection was slow but functional, and what Sam discovered made his blood run colder with each passing hour. Dr. Red Cloud had vanished in September 2009, 15 years ago. He'd been a respected geologist with the Arkansas Geological Survey, specializing in mineral assessments for private landowners. According to the missing person reports Sam found archived in local newspaper websites, Dr. Red Cloud had been conducting a routine survey of properties in the Ozark region when he simply disappeared. His rental car was found abandoned at a gas station 30 miles away, but no trace of the man himself had ever been discovered. The investigation had been brief and seemingly thorough. Local sheriff's deputies had interviewed property owners in the area, including Sam himself, though Sam's memory of that conversation was hazy. He'd been dealing with his own demons at the time, fresh from Afghanistan and struggling with nightmares that made every interaction feel surreal. The case had gone cold within weeks, filed away as another unfortunate disappearance in wilderness country where people sometimes vanished without explanation. But now, Sam understood why Dr. Red Cloud had been on his property. The geologist's field notes, preserved in the waterproof case Sam had found in the Oaks Hollow, told a chilling story. Red Cloud had been conducting mineral surveys for a private development company, testing soil samples and rock formations throughout the region. His handwriting was precise, documenting mineral compositions and geological features with scientific accuracy. The final entries were the most revealing. Dr. Red Cloud had discovered significant uranium deposits beneath Sam's property. Not weapons-grade material, but valuable enough for energy companies willing to pay premium prices for domestic sources. The notes indicated Red Cloud had planned to file his report the following week, recommending the land for mineral rights acquisition. Someone had killed him to prevent that report from being filed. Sam's investigation revealed more disturbing patterns. Over the past 15 years, several elderly Native American landowners in the region had died under circumstances that seemed natural but now appeared suspicious. Heart attacks, strokes, accidents, all occurring shortly before their properties were sold to development companies for far below market value. The common thread was Thomas. Sam's nephew had been present in all these cases, serving as a helpful family friend or distant relative who assisted with end-of-life arrangements. Thomas's land development company had acquired each property within months of the owner's death, always through grateful heirs who praised his generosity in handling complex legal matters during their time of grief. Chief's behavior had grown increasingly protective as Sam delved deeper into the research. The dog refused to leave his side, following him from room to room with the vigilance of a bodyguard. When Thomas called for his weekly check-in, Chief's reaction was immediate and alarming. Hackles raised, a low growl rumbling from his throat, amber eyes fixed on the phone as if he could sense the threat emanating from the device itself. "You're breathing hard, Uncle Sam." Thomas's voice carried its usual concern during their Thursday conversation. "Are you remembering to take your heart medication? I noticed the bottle was getting low when I was there last week." Sam's hand paused over the pill bottle sitting on his kitchen counter. Thomas had indeed refilled the prescription during his visit, driving to the pharmacy in town as he always did, handling the details that Sam found increasingly burdensome. But Chief's reaction to Thomas's voice triggered a memory that made Sam's blood chill. Chief had been acting strangely around Thomas for months, maybe longer. The dog's military training had taught him to detect threats that human senses couldn't perceive. Chemical traces, buried explosives, hidden dangers. Chief's nose could identify substances that would be invisible to anyone else, including poison. Sam examined the heart medication more carefully after ending the call. The pills looked identical to his usual prescription, but something felt wrong. Chief's behavior around the medicine bottle was telling. The dog had been avoiding the kitchen counter where Sam kept his daily pills, occasionally whining and pawing at his master's hand when Sam reached for them. The pieces of a horrifying puzzle began falling into place. Thomas's frequent visits, always timed around medication refills, Sam's increasing fatigue and confusion over recent months, the convenient timing of other landowners' deaths, always occurring when their health was already fragile. Thomas wasn't just stealing land, he was methodically murdering the rightful owners. That evening, Sam made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. He stopped taking his heart medication, instead disposing of the pills where Chief could see him doing it. The dog's reaction was immediate relief, his tail wagging for the first time in weeks as he watched the suspicious pills disappear down the garbage disposal. Within hours, Sam felt clearer than he had in months. His thinking sharpened, his energy returned, and the persistent fog that had clouded his judgment began to lift. The medication Thomas had been providing wasn't treating his heart condition, it was slowly killing him. Sam also began finding other evidence of Thomas's deception. His computer had been accessed remotely, files copied and deleted. His mail had been intercepted and redirected. Bank statements showed automatic payments to companies Sam had never heard of, all connected to Thomas's business interests. The systematic theft of his autonomy and assets had been happening for months, possibly years. Most chilling was the discovery that Sam's will had been altered. The document on file with Thomas's law firm left everything to his nephew, including mineral rights that would make Thomas a multimillionaire once Sam was dead. The original will, which Sam kept in his bedroom safe, left the land to the Cherokee Nation for preservation as ancestral territory. Chief had been trying to protect him all along. The dog's increasingly aggressive behavior toward Thomas wasn't jealousy or aging-related confusion. It was recognition of a predator who posed a direct threat to his master's survival. Sam realized he was in immediate danger. Thomas would expect the poisoning to accelerate now that Sam had discovered Dr. Red Cloud's body. The nephew couldn't afford to let Sam live long enough to involve authorities or change his will back to its original form. An old man with a heart condition, stressed by discovering human remains on his property, would naturally suffer a fatal episode. No one would question such a convenient death. But Thomas had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated both Sam's military training and Chief's unwavering loyalty. The old soldier and his battle-tested companion weren't helpless victims waiting for death. They were survivors who had faced worse enemies than a greedy relative armed with poison and forged documents. Sam spent Friday preparing for what he now understood was inevitable confrontation. He cleaned his service pistol for the first time in years, checking the mechanism and loading fresh ammunition. Chief watched these preparations with the focused attention of a soldier receiving mission briefings, his intelligent eyes reflecting understanding that danger was approaching. The phone calls started that afternoon. Thomas, claiming concern about Sam's mental state after discovering the body. A lawyer, suggesting Sam might need assistance managing his affairs during this stressful time. A doctor, recommending immediate evaluation for cognitive decline that could indicate serious health issues. The coordinated pressure confirmed Sam's worst fears. Thomas had assembled a team of accomplices ready to declare Sam mentally incompetent, allowing them to seize control of his property and assets while he was still alive. It was a sophisticated operation that had probably been used against other elderly landowners who had become inconvenient obstacles to Thomas's expansion plans. But Thomas's calls also revealed something else: panic. The nephew's voice carried an edge of desperation that hadn't been there before. He was moving faster than planned, probably because he'd realized Sam had stopped taking the poisoned medication and was regaining his mental clarity. Sam's research into Dr. Red Cloud's background revealed one more crucial detail that changed everything. The geologist had a daughter, Sarah Littlefeather, who had never stopped searching for her father. Her contact information was listed on several missing person websites, along with photos and detailed accounts of her ongoing investigation into his disappearance. Sarah had been following the same patterns Sam had discovered: suspicious deaths among Native American landowners, convenient property acquisitions, and the recurring presence of Thomas Blackwater in each case. She'd been building a federal case against the land theft conspiracy, but lacked the evidence needed to prove murder. Dr. Red Cloud's remains, preserved in the oak tree that Chief had led Sam to discover, would provide that proof. Sam made the call Saturday morning, knowing it would trigger the final phase of Thomas's plan, but also knowing it was the only way to ensure justice for all the victims. Sarah Littlefeather's voice broke when Sam told her they'd found her father, but her determination was stronger than her grief. "I'll contact the FBI immediately," she said, her words rushed with urgency. "They've been waiting for evidence like this, but you need to understand, you're in danger now." "If Thomas realizes what you've found, he'll move against you quickly." "Let him come," Sam replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who had faced death before and survived. "Chief and I aren't the easy targets he thinks we are." But even as he spoke those words, Sam knew the next 24 hours would determine whether justice would finally be served or whether Thomas's conspiracy would claim 2 more victims. The battle for his land, his life, and his legacy was about to begin. Chief pressed against his legs, offering the same steady comfort that had sustained them through combat zones half a world away. Together, they would face whatever came next. Thomas arrived Sunday morning with 3 men Sam didn't recognize. They drove up the gravel road in 2 vehicles. Thomas in his usual black SUV, followed by a white van with tinted windows that screamed government agency or private security. Sam watched their approach from his kitchen window, Chief pressed against his legs with every muscle tensed for combat. "Stay close, boy," Sam murmured, his hand resting on the service pistol concealed beneath his flannel shirt. "This is what we trained for." The men who emerged from the van moved with the careful precision of professionals. 2 wore suits that didn't quite conceal shoulder holsters, while the third carried a briefcase and had the soft look of someone who solved problems with paperwork rather than bullets. Thomas led them toward the cabin with the confident stride of a man who believed he held all the advantages. Sam met them on the front porch, Chief positioned slightly ahead and to the right, a protective stance the dog had learned in Afghanistan when approaching potentially hostile contacts. The German Shepherd's amber eyes tracked each man's movements, cataloging threats with the efficiency of a trained sentinel. "Uncle Sam," Thomas called out with forced cheerfulness, "I brought some people to help us deal with this terrible situation. This is Dr. Morrison from the County Mental Health Services, and these gentlemen are from a private security firm that specializes in elder care protection." Chief's growl was low and continuous, a sound that made the 2 armed men shift nervously. They'd probably dealt with aggressive dogs before, but Chief's bearing was different. This wasn't a pet protecting territory, but a military asset assessing combat conditions. "Protection from what?" Sam asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded respect in special operations. "Doctor." Morrison stepped forward, opening his briefcase with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed this routine many times. "Mr. Whitehorse, your nephew has expressed serious concerns about your mental state. Finding human remains on your property would be traumatic for anyone, but at your age, with your medical history, such stress can trigger serious cognitive decline." "My mind's clearer than it's been in months," Sam replied, noting how Chief's attention focused on the briefcase. The dog's nose twitched, identifying chemical traces that human senses couldn't detect. Sedatives, most likely. Drugs designed to make an unwilling patient compliant during involuntary commitment proceedings. "That's exactly what someone experiencing a psychological break would say," Dr. Morrison continued smoothly. "The paranoid delusions, the conspiracy theories about your medication, the aggressive behavior toward family members, these are classic symptoms of stress-induced dementia." Thomas had coached him well. Every symptom Morrison described could be used to justify emergency psychiatric hold, allowing them to seize control of Sam's property and assets while he was held for evaluation in a facility where he might never be declared competent to return home. "You boys picked the wrong old man to mess with," Sam said quietly, his hand moving toward his concealed weapon. But before he could draw, Chief exploded into action. The German Shepherd launched himself at the nearest armed man with the lethal precision of his military training. 80 pounds of muscle and bone struck the target center mass, driving him backward into the van with a crash that echoed across the valley. Chief's jaws clamped down on the man's gun arm, preventing any attempt to draw his weapon while his powerful hindquarters braced for a sustained struggle. The second security operative went for his gun, but Sam's combat reflexes, honed by decades of training and sharpened by the adrenaline of mortal danger, proved faster. The service pistol appeared in his weathered hands with fluid efficiency, its barrel tracking toward the threat with mechanical precision. "Federal agents," a voice shouted from the tree line. "Drop your weapons! Everyone on the ground now!" FBI agents emerged from concealment positions around the cabin, their tactical gear and automatic weapons transforming the morning confrontation into a full-scale law enforcement operation. Sarah Littlefeather had kept her promise. The federal investigation into the land theft conspiracy was already underway, with Sam's property under surveillance as a potential crime scene. Thomas's face went white as the scope of his situation became clear. The careful conspiracy that had operated for 15 years was collapsing around him, and the old soldier he'd planned to murder was proving far more dangerous than anticipated. "This is a mistake," Thomas shouted as agents moved to secure the scene. "My uncle is mentally ill. These people are taking advantage of a confused old man who found some bones in the woods." But the lead FBI agent, a stern woman in her 40s, wasn't interested in Thomas's explanations. "Thomas Blackwater, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and federal violations related to the systematic theft of Native American lands. You have the right to remain silent." Dr. Morrison tried to run, but Chief, having neutralized his first target, was already moving to intercept. The dog's training included pursuit and detention of fleeing suspects, skills that hadn't diminished during his civilian years. Morrison hit the ground hard, Chief's weight pinning him while agents moved in with handcuffs. The two security operatives surrendered without further resistance, their professional calm shattered by the realization they'd walked into a federal sting operation. Whatever Thomas had paid them wasn't worth spending decades in federal prison for murder conspiracy. As the chaos settled and suspects were secured, Sam found himself face to face with a young Native American woman whose eyes held the same determination he'd seen in combat veterans. Sarah Littlefeather had her father's strong features, but carried the weight of 15 years spent searching for answers about his disappearance. "Mr. Whitehorse," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "thank you for finding him. Thank you for not letting them bury the truth with his bones." Chief padded over to Sam's side, his mission complete but his protective instincts still alert. The dog's tactical vest, which Sam had retrieved from storage that morning, bore the scars of their confrontation, but had performed its function perfectly. Even in retirement, Chief remained a warrior when duty called. "Your father was a good man," Sam told Sarah, watching as federal agents began the careful process of excavating Dr. Red Cloud's remains from the oak tree. "He died trying to protect what was ours. Least I could do was make sure his sacrifice meant something." The investigation that followed would reveal the full scope of Thomas's conspiracy. 17 elderly Native American landowners had died under suspicious circumstances over the past 15 years, their properties acquired through a network of corrupt officials, forged documents, and systematic poisoning. Thomas's development company had stolen over 50,000 acres of ancestral land, enriching himself and his accomplices while destroying families and communities. But it was Chief's testimony, in the form of his behavioral responses to chemical traces and his recognition of Thomas as a threat, that provided crucial evidence linking the conspiracy to Dr. Red Cloud's murder. The dog's military training had preserved evidence that human investigators might have missed, maintaining the chain of proof needed to ensure justice. As federal agents processed the crime scene and media crews arrived to document the largest land theft prosecution in Arkansas history, Sam sat on his porch with Chief pressed against his side. The morning's violence had taken its toll on both of them, but they had survived. More importantly, they had won. "You knew all along, didn't you, boy?" Sam scratched behind Chief's ears, feeling the steady heartbeat of his loyal companion. 15 years you carried that secret, waiting for the right moment to show me the truth." Chief's amber eyes held depths of understanding that went beyond normal canine intelligence. The dog had witnessed Thomas's crime as a young military working dog, fresh from training but not yet deployed to Afghanistan. The trauma of seeing murder committed on his master's land had shaped Chief's subsequent behavior, creating the protective instincts that had ultimately saved both their lives. The conspiracy was broken, the victims would receive justice, and the land would remain in Cherokee hands where it belonged. But the cost had been high, and Sam knew the hardest battles still lay ahead. Thomas's trial would be lengthy and painful, forcing him to relive the betrayal and violence that had shattered his family. Yet as he watched Chief's tail wag for the first time in weeks, Sam felt something he hadn't experienced since Emma's death. Hope for the future. 3 hours after the FBI arrests, everything changed in a heartbeat. Chief had been pacing the porch restlessly while federal agents processed the crime scene, his ears swiveling toward sounds Sam couldn't detect. The German Shepherd's training had taught him to identify threats from multiple directions simultaneously, a skill that had kept their unit alive through countless patrols in hostile territory. When the dog suddenly froze, every muscle taut as a bowstring, Sam knew something was wrong. Chief's amber eyes locked onto the tree line where the old hunting trail emerged from thick forest. Someone was coming, someone moving with the stealth of a predator rather than the casual approach of curious neighbors drawn by the law enforcement activity. The rifle shot came without warning, its sharp crack echoing across the valley like thunder. Chief yelped and spun sideways, crimson spreading across his tactical vest as the bullet found its mark. The German Shepherd stumbled but remained upright, his military training overriding the shock of pain as he positioned himself between Sam and the hidden shooter. "Chief!" Sam's anguished cry cut through the mountain air as he dove toward his wounded companion. The dog's breathing was labored, blood seeping through the protective vest that had deflected the worst of the shot but hadn't prevented serious injury. Chief's eyes, usually bright with intelligence and loyalty, were clouding with pain and the terrible knowledge that his master was still in danger. A second shot splintered the porch railing inches from Sam's head, followed by a voice that chilled his blood more than enemy fire ever had. "Should have taken your medicine like a good boy, Uncle Sam." Richard Blackwater emerged from the forest, rifle trained on the cabin. Thomas's younger brother, the one family member Sam had trusted implicitly, the nephew who had served as executor of Emma's will and had been designated as Sam's emergency contact for all medical decisions. Richard's face was twisted with rage and desperation, all pretense of family affection finally stripped away. "You cost me everything!" Richard screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. 15 years building this operation, millions of dollars in mineral rights, and you had to go digging around that damn tree. Sam's service pistol was in his hand, but Chief's body blocked his line of fire. The wounded dog was trying to crawl closer, still attempting to protect his master despite his injuries. Each labored breath sent more blood pooling on the wooden planks, and Sam could see Chief's strength fading with each passing second. FBI agents were shouting orders from their positions around the property, but Richard had chosen his position well. The hunting blind 20 yards up the hillside provided excellent cover and clear fields of fire toward the cabin. Any attempt to approach would result in certain casualties, and Richard seemed beyond caring about his own survival. "Thomas was always too soft," Richard continued, his rifle never wavering from its target. "Fancy poisons, complicated legal schemes, should have just put a bullet in your head years ago and claimed self-defense. Crazy old veteran has flashback, threatens family member, tragic accident." Chief made one final, heroic effort to reach Sam's side. The German Shepherd's powerful legs pushed against the porch planks, dragging his wounded body across the space between them with determination that transcended physical limitations. His amber eyes, dulling but still fierce with protective instinct, met Sam's with a look that conveyed everything words could never express: love, loyalty, forgiveness for all the time Sam had doubted himself, pride in their shared service, acceptance of the sacrifice he was making. "I love you too, boy," Sam whispered, his weathered hand finding Chief's blood-matted fur. "You're the best soldier I ever served with." Chief's tail made one weak wag at the familiar words of praise. Then his body went still, amber eyes losing their focus as the loyal heart finally stopped beating. 15 years of partnership, from the battlefields of Afghanistan to the peaceful mountains of Arkansas, ended in a pool of blood on the cabin porch where they had shared so many quiet mornings. The grief that engulfed Sam was immediate and overwhelming, not just for Chief's death but for the realization that family, the blood relation he had trusted above all others, had orchestrated this betrayal. Richard had been there when Emma died, offering comfort and support during Sam's darkest hours. He had helped plan the funeral, manage the estate paperwork, even suggested that Chief might help with Sam's grief and isolation. All of it calculated manipulation, designed to position himself for the eventual theft of Sam's land and legacy. "Nothing to say, Uncle Sam?" Richard's voice carried a mocking tone that Sam remembered from childhood family gatherings, when Richard's jealousy of his older cousins had manifested in cruel pranks and bitter comments. "No last words for the nephew who's been taking such good care of you?" Sam's hand tightened on his pistol grip, muscle memory from decades of combat taking over. Chief's body provided partial concealment, but not enough for a clean shot at Richard's position. The FBI agents were positioning for their own assault, but their movements would take precious seconds that Sam might not have. Richard was spiraling into complete breakdown, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the pressure of seeing his conspiracy exposed. Men in that mental state became unpredictable and extremely dangerous. They might surrender peacefully, or they might decide to take as many people with them as possible. "You know what the funny thing is?" Richard continued, his rifle sight never leaving Sam's position. "Chief figured it out before you did. Dog started acting strange every time I came around, like he could smell the guilt on me. Should have poisoned him first, but Thomas said it would be too suspicious." The casual admission of planning Chief's murder was the final straw. Sam felt the cold clarity that had served him in combat situations descend like a familiar cloak. The grief and rage crystallized into focused determination. Chief had died protecting him, and that sacrifice would not be meaningless. Justice would be served, even if it cost Sam his own life. What happened next unfolded in the space between heartbeats, when time seemed to slow and every detail became crystal clear. Sam had experienced this phenomenon in combat, the moment when training, instinct, and desperate necessity fused into something beyond conscious thought. Chief's final gift revealed itself in the positioning of his body. The loyal German Shepherd had collapsed at precisely the angle needed to provide Sam with concealment while offering a clear shooting lane toward Richard's position. Even in death, Chief was protecting his master with the tactical intelligence that had made him legendary among special operations units. Richard's mistake was believing his uncle was helpless with grief. The younger man had never served in combat, had never learned that warriors don't break, they adapt. Richard saw an old man cradling his dead dog and assumed victory was assured. He relaxed his grip on the rifle for just a moment, letting the barrel drift slightly off target as he prepared to deliver what he believed would be his final taunt. Sam moved with the fluid precision of muscle memory that never truly fades. His service pistol came up in a two-handed grip, sight picture acquired in the fraction of a second. Richard's attention wavered. The fundamentals of marksmanship, breath control, trigger squeeze, follow through, executed with the mechanical perfection of someone who had performed these motions thousands of times under stress. The shot took Richard's center mass, spinning him backward into the hunting blind's wooden frame. His rifle clattered uselessly down the hillside as he clutched at the spreading crimson on his chest, his face registering shock that his carefully planned execution had become his own death warrant. "Chief sends his regards," Sam said quietly, his weapon still trained on Richard's position as FBI agents swarmed up the hillside to secure the scene. But Richard wasn't finished. With the desperate strength of a dying man, he reached for a concealed pistol at his ankle, a backup weapon Sam's military experience had anticipated. The second shot was necessary and precise, ending the threat before Richard could harm anyone else. The silence that followed was different from the peaceful quiet Sam had cherished in these mountains. This was the hollow aftermath of violence, when adrenaline fades and the full weight of what has occurred settles like a physical burden. Richard lay motionless in the hunting blind, blood pooling beneath him, as federal agents confirmed what Sam already knew: his nephew was dead. Sarah Littlefeather was the first to reach Sam's side, her face etched with understanding that came from her own long struggle for justice. She knelt beside Chief's body, her hand gentle on the dog's still form as she spoke words of gratitude in the Lakota language her grandmother had taught her. "He saved both our lives," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "If Chief hadn't led you to that tree, if he hadn't protected you today, none of this would have been possible." The FBI agents who processed the scene treated Chief's body with the respect due a fallen comrade. Special Agent Martinez, herself a veteran, coordinated the careful removal of the German Shepherd's remains while ensuring the tactical vest and other evidence were preserved for the ongoing investigation. "Military working dogs are considered service members," she explained to Sam as they prepared to transport Chief's body. "He'll receive full honors at the ceremony." "It's the least we can do for a hero who served his country and saved lives until the very end." The revelation that emerged during Richard's post-mortem investigation was staggering in its scope. While Thomas had focused on the legal and financial aspects of their land theft conspiracy, Richard had handled the violent enforcement. 17 murders over 15 years, each one carefully planned and executed to appear natural or accidental. Richard's personal journal, discovered in a safe deposit box during the federal investigation, detailed his growing resentment toward the inferior people who occupied valuable land. His racism had festered alongside his greed, creating a toxic worldview that justified any atrocity in service of profit and perceived genetic superiority. Dr. Red Cloud hadn't been Richard's first victim, he'd been the 7th. The geologist's death had been particularly brutal because he'd fought back, forcing Richard to improvise the tree burial when his original disposal plan failed. Chief had witnessed that struggle, had seen Dr. Red Cloud's final moments and Richard's methodical concealment of the crime. The trauma of witnessing murder had shaped Chief's subsequent behavior in ways that became clear only in retrospect. His protective instincts around Sam, his aggressive reactions to certain chemical scents, his refusal to venture near the oak tree, all symptoms of a loyal animal carrying unbearable knowledge while lacking the ability to communicate it directly. But Chief had found a way. Through 15 years of subtle warnings, behavioral cues, and unwavering devotion, he had guided Sam toward the truth. The dog's final sacrifice had ensured that justice would be served and that no other families would suffer the losses that had defined too many lives in these mountains. The federal investigation also revealed the broader network that had enabled the Blackwater conspiracy. Corrupt county officials, complicit lawyers, and bribed medical personnel had created a system designed to prey on elderly Native Americans who lacked the resources or connections to fight back effectively. Judge Margaret Crow Feather, a federal appointee with Cherokee heritage, would oversee the trials that followed. Her appointment to the case was both symbolic and practical. As someone who understood the cultural significance of ancestral lands, she would ensure that the victims' voices were heard and their suffering acknowledged in ways the justice system had previously failed to provide. Sam's testimony would be crucial to securing convictions, but his most important contribution had already been made. By stopping Richard's final rampage, he had preserved the evidence and witnesses needed to unravel the entire conspiracy. Chief's heroism had saved not just Sam's life, but the integrity of the federal case that would bring justice to 17 families. The media attention that followed was overwhelming but ultimately positive. Chief's story resonated with veterans groups, law enforcement agencies, and animal welfare organizations across the country. The image of a loyal dog carrying the secret of murder for 15 years, protecting his master until his final breath, captured the public imagination in ways that transcended typical crime reporting. But for Sam, the attention felt hollow without Chief's presence to share it. The cabin was too quiet, the daily routines too empty without his four-legged companion's steady presence. Emma's death had been devastating, but Chief's sacrifice left a different kind of void, the loss of a being who had understood him completely and loved him unconditionally. Sarah Littlefeather became a regular visitor during the weeks that followed, helping Sam navigate the legal proceedings while building a friendship forged in shared loss and mutual respect. Her father's remains had been returned to the family for proper burial, bringing closure to a 15-year search that had defined her adult life. Chief knew, she said during one of their conversations on Sam's porch, where the blood stains had been scrubbed away but the memories remained. Dogs see souls, not just bodies. He recognized Richard's evil long before any of us understood what we were dealing with. The Cherokee Nation's Tribal Council voted unanimously to honor Chief with a memorial on Sam's property near the oak tree that had held Dr. Red Cloud's remains. The ceremony would include veterans from multiple tribes, law enforcement officers, and the families of all 17 victims whose deaths had finally been acknowledged and avenged. But the most meaningful tribute came from an unexpected source. The Army's Military Working Dog Program requested Chief's service records for inclusion in their Hall of Fame, recognizing his post-military heroism as an extension of his combat service. Chief would be remembered not just as a pet, but as a warrior who had continued fighting for justice long after his official duty ended. As Sam prepared to attend Richard's burial, a family obligation he felt compelled to honor despite everything that had happened, he reflected on the terrible irony of the situation. The nephew he had loved and trusted had been planning his murder for years, while the dog he had rescued from a war zone had died protecting him from that very family member. Blood might be thicker than water, but loyalty was thicker than blood. Chief had proven that love was a choice, not an accident of genetics, and that true family was defined by devotion rather than DNA. The conspiracy was broken. The victims had found justice, and the truth had finally emerged from its wooden tomb. But the price of that victory would echo through Sam's remaining years, a reminder that some battles are won only through the ultimate sacrifice of those we love most. 6 months after Chief's death, Sam Whitehorse stood before the largest gathering his property had ever seen. Veterans from 3 wars, FBI agents who had worked the case, tribal elders from 7 Native American nations, and families of the 17 victims had come to witness the dedication of the Chief Memorial Grove, a circle of young oak trees planted around the ancient giant that had held Dr. Red Cloud's remains. Sarah Littlefeather stood beside him, her father's ashes finally at rest beneath a granite marker that bore his name alongside the Lakota phrase, Wakan Tankakichiun, may the Great Spirit be with you. She had become the daughter Sam never had, filling part of the void that Emma's death had created while bringing her own strength and purpose to his remaining years. Chief taught us something we'd forgotten, Sam said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd without need for amplification. Loyalty isn't about blood relations or legal documents. It's about choosing to stand with someone when the whole world seems against them. It's about carrying burdens you can't share and protecting people who might never understand the sacrifice you're making. The memorial grove represented more than just Chief's heroism. Each tree bore a small plaque honoring one of the victims whose deaths the Blackwater conspiracy had caused. Dr. James Red Cloud, whose scientific integrity had cost him his life. Emma Crow Dog, an 82-year-old grandmother whose heart attack had allowed Thomas to acquire her family's mineral-rich land for a fraction of its value. Joseph Running Bear, a Korean War veteran whose accidental drowning had occurred just days before he planned to challenge the sale of his ancestral fishing grounds. The federal investigation had ultimately identified 23 suspicious deaths, though only 17 could be proven as murders. The pattern stretched back nearly 2 decades, targeting elderly Native Americans whose properties contained valuable resources or strategic locations for development projects. The Blackwater brothers had built their fortunes on a foundation of systematic genocide, disguised as natural causes and tragic accidents. Thomas's trial had concluded 3 weeks earlier with a life sentence on federal murder charges. The younger brother's cooperation with prosecutors, motivated by his desperate desire to avoid the death penalty, had provided the detailed evidence needed to secure justice for the families. His testimony revealed the cold calculation behind each killing, the careful research into victims' health conditions and family situations, the methodical planning that had made their crimes nearly undetectable. But it was Chief's story that had captured the nation's attention and transformed a regional criminal case into a symbol of loyalty and justice. Military working dog associations across the country had contributed to the Memorial Fund, recognizing Chief's post-service heroism as an extension of his combat duty. Veterans groups had embraced the story of a soldier and his faithful companion fighting corruption and murder in their own homeland. Sam had struggled with the attention initially, uncomfortable with being called a hero when he felt like he'd simply done what needed to be done. But Sarah had helped him understand that Chief's legacy deserved to be shared, that the story could inspire others to trust their instincts and stand up to injustice when they encountered it. The hardest part, Sam continued his speech, was learning to see the truth. Chief had been trying to show me for 15 years. Dogs don't lie, don't make excuses, don't rationalize evil behavior because it comes from family. Chief knew Richard was dangerous long before I was willing to admit it to myself. The crowd included several children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the victims who had grown up wondering what had happened to their missing relatives. 10-year-old Michael Red Cloud, Dr. James's grandson, had asked Sam if Chief was in heaven with his grandfather. Sam's answer, that faithful friends always find each other again, had become one of the most quoted lines from the numerous interviews he'd given about the case. Special Agent Martinez presented Sam with the flag that had covered Chief's casket during the military honors ceremony 6 months earlier. The German Shepherd had been buried with full honors at Arlington National Cemetery, the first military working dog to receive such recognition for post-service heroism. His grave marker listed his service record alongside a simple inscription, "Faithful unto death." The memorial ceremony also marked the formal establishment of the Chief Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to investigating suspicious deaths among elderly Native Americans and providing resources for families seeking answers about missing relatives. Sarah served as executive director, coordinating with federal agencies and tribal law enforcement to identify patterns that might indicate ongoing criminal activity. Sam's role in the foundation was part investigator, part counselor. His military experience and hard-won understanding of how corruption operated made him effective at spotting inconsistencies in official reports. But more importantly, his journey from victim to survivor to advocate gave him credibility with families who had been dismissed or ignored by local authorities. The Foundation's first major case had already yielded results. 3 suspicious deaths in Montana, initially attributed to exposure and accident, showed patterns similar to the Blackwater murders. Federal investigators were now examining land deals and mineral rights transfers in that region, following the trail of evidence that Chief's sacrifice had helped establish. "I've been asked many times if I regret not seeing the truth sooner," Sam said, approaching the conclusion of his remarks. "If I wish I'd stopped Richard and Thomas before they killed so many innocent people. The answer is yes. I wish Chief and I had been smarter, faster, more suspicious of family members who claimed to care about us." He paused, looking out at the faces gathered around the memorial grove. Veterans who understood the bonds forged in combat. Native Americans who had experienced the generational trauma of land theft and cultural destruction. FBI agents who had dedicated their careers to protecting the vulnerable from predators who exploited trust and authority. But Chief taught me that guilt over past failures can't be allowed to prevent future action. He carried the secret of Dr. Red Cloud's murder for 15 years, never giving up hope that somehow, someday, justice would be possible. When the moment came, he was ready to sacrifice everything to protect what mattered most. The ceremony concluded with the traditional Cherokee honor song, performed by tribal elders who had known Sam's grandfather and remembered when the land had been worked by previous generations of the White Horse family. The melody carried across the mountains that had witnessed so much violence and deception, but now stood as monuments to the truth that Chief had died protecting. As the crowd dispersed, many visitors stopped to pay their respects at Chief's memorial stone, a granite boulder placed at the center of the grove where the loyal German shepherd could continue watching over the land he had protected. Children left small toys and treats, while veterans placed challenge coins and unit patches as tokens of respect for a fellow warrior. Sam remained behind with Sarah as the sun set behind the western peaks, painting the memorial grove in shades of gold and crimson. The young oak trees would grow slowly, requiring decades to reach maturity, but their roots were already establishing the foundation for a forest that would outlast everyone present at the dedication. "What do you think he would have thought about all this?" Sarah asked, her hand resting on Chief's memorial stone. "The attention, the foundation, the people traveling from across the country to honor him?" Sam considered the question seriously, remembering Chief's modest nature and preference for quiet recognition over public praise. "I think he'd be pleased that Dr. Red Cloud finally got a proper burial and that you got your father back. Everything else would just be nice extra credit." The conversation was interrupted by the approach of a familiar vehicle. Special Agent Martinez's government sedan navigated the gravel road with careful precision, and Sam could see she wasn't alone. A small passenger in the back seat pressed against the window, tail wagging with enthusiasm that was visible even at a distance. "I have someone here who's been waiting to meet you," Martinez called out as she parked near the memorial grove. She opened the rear door to release a young German Shepherd puppy whose markings were remarkably similar to Chief's distinctive coloring. "This is Rex, Chief's nephew from the same breeding line. The military working dog program wanted you to have first choice." Rex bounded toward Sam with the fearless enthusiasm of youth, his amber eyes bright with intelligence and curiosity. The puppy's energy was infectious, his presence immediately filling some of the emptiness that had lingered around the property since Chief's death. "He's got the bloodline and the temperament for military service," Martinez explained, "but the program coordinators thought he might prefer civilian duty with someone who understands the commitment involved." Sam knelt to meet Rex at eye level, allowing the puppy to investigate his scent and accept or reject the introduction on canine terms. The young dog's response was immediate and positive, tail wagging, gentle mouth exploring Sam's weathered hands, body language indicating complete trust and readiness to bond. "What do you think, boy?" Sam asked quietly. "Ready to help an old soldier keep Chief's promise?" Rex's answer came in the form of enthusiastic licking and a determined attempt to climb into Sam's lap despite being significantly larger than a typical lap dog. The puppy's exuberance drew laughter from the gathered veterans and family members who had witnessed the introduction. As darkness settled over the Arkansas mountains and the Memorial Grove became a collection of shadows and moonlight, Sam walked toward his cabin with Rex trotting beside him. The young dog's presence couldn't replace Chief's memory, but it offered something equally valuable: the promise that loyalty, courage, and unconditional love would continue protecting what mattered most. The fight for justice would continue. The Foundation would investigate new cases, and somewhere in the mountains, other families would find the answers that Chief's sacrifice had made possible. But tonight, an old soldier and a young dog would begin building the partnership that would carry Chief's legacy forward into whatever challenges lay ahead. Dear friends, this story reminds us that family isn't always found in bloodlines. Sometimes it's discovered in the unwavering loyalty of a four-legged companion who sees our worth when we've forgotten it ourselves. Samuel and Chief's bond transcends the typical pet-owner relationship. It represents the profound connections that sustain us through life's darkest valleys and most unexpected betrayals. At our stage of life, many of us face similar challenges: health concerns that make us vulnerable, family dynamics that shift in unsettling ways, and the growing awareness that those we trust most might not always have our best interests at heart. Yet Samuel's journey from isolation to purpose shows us that it's never too late to stand up for what's right, to form new, meaningful relationships, and to transform our pain into something that serves others. Chief's 15-year vigil teaches us about patience, about carrying burdens with grace, and about the courage to act when action is required, regardless of age or circumstance. The foundation Samuel created honors not just Chief's memory, but the truth that our experiences, however painful, can become sources of healing for others facing similar struggles. What loyal companion, human or animal, has shaped your understanding of true devotion? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was not who they seemed to be? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.